Hello, everyone. Bonjour, bienvenue. Welcome to the National Managers Community Virtual Talk this Tuesday, November 30th, 2021. Je suis Marianne Mederick and the Regional Lead for Ontario. As you may be aware, your microphones and cameras have been disabled. If you notice that they are on, we ask that you please turn them off. Our event today will be recorded and a YouTube video link will be made available following the session. For the best experience, we encourage you to disconnect from your VPN. I'd like to begin this event by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by the Indigenous people from the beginning. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee people. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. I invite you now to take a moment to reflect on the land in which you live, work, and play. Thank you. I'm very excited about our virtual talk today. Preventing burnout is a topic that continues to come up in conversations with managers. Today we have Amanda Burri, registered psychotherapist who works with the CBSA Employee Assistance Program, to talk to you about building resilience and preventing burnout. Amanda completed her Master of Arts in Counseling and Spirituality from St. Paul University. She's been working in the federal government for the past 6 years. I'm also joined by my colleague, Hélène Larose, Regional Lead for the NCR. Hélène will be supporting us today by translating Amanda's presentation in French. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to Amanda, who can begin by telling us what resiliency is and how do we become more resilient.
Awesome. Thank you, Marianne, for the wonderful introduction and warm welcome. And thank you for having me today. I am super excited to be here with all of you to spend some time talking about building resilience and preventing work burnout. Like Marianne said, it is a constant discussion, especially in the times that over the past couple of months, or well, about 15 to 20 months now. So let's get started with the definition of resilience and what it really is. Resilience is our ability to withstand adversity and to bounce back from difficult life events. So I invite you to think of a person that you know who you consider to be resilient. What do you think made them that resilient? Or from your point of view, what are they doing that makes them appear to be resilient? And if you're comfortable, feel free to share it in the chat, share what makes this person so resilient. A word of caution while thinking about this. So I think it's a good idea for all of us to be as resilient as possible, although it's not always actually achievable for some people. And we have to really recognize and accept that. So some of us have had experiences or traumas in our life that have worn down our resilience. Everyone's level of resilience is different, and we have varying degrees of resilience at different points in our lives. So one person's resilience level might be much higher than another's, but for that other person in the exact same situation, it might be a lot to handle. So really the question is, how do we become more resilient? One tool to build resilience is to understand what is within your own control. So we're going to see a slide in a moment. It's called the circle of control slide. And while that's coming up, I'll take a look at the chat. People I know who are resilient tend to take the long view and not stress too much about smaller stressors. Definitely. Former DG was a very positive person, never seemed to get stressed out in high pressure situations. Problem solver, always thought of solutions. So we'll talk a bit about that today as well. I've seen those who have the ability to build in boundaries for work-life balance. We're going to be talking about boundaries today as well. Lots more comments coming up. Wonderful. It's so exciting that so many of you have individuals in your life who are resilient and who are modeling resilience, really. Being able to bounce back after a stressful event, definitely. So do we have the circle of control image.
Maybe if you want to continue, I will try to share it in the chat. Well,
Okay.
if we have difficulties getting it up there.
Sure. So in the image, you'll see a circle, and it's called the circle of control because we want to always ask ourselves, what control do I have in this moment? Perfect. So in life, there's going to be things that undoubtedly we can and we cannot control. When we recognize that we are having worry thoughts, or when we recognize that we're feeling stress within our bodies, we get to pause, we get to take a minute to be mindful of our circle of control. This is what's going to help us process, and it's going to help keep us aware of what we can versus cannot control at that time. And anytime you experience those worry thoughts or those concerns becoming louder or longer in duration, again, I invite you to look at the circle of control. Even if a new worry pops up, you're going to want to ask yourself that same question. Is this something that I can directly control? Or put otherwise, is this in my circle of control? Write it down, get it out of your head and on paper right in front of you. Notice how you feel as you're considering this question or as you're answering that question. I also encourage each of you to kind of create your own circle of control so that you can add your own worries and concerns to the circle and then consider them as you go along in your everyday life. So you'll see in the image, there's all sorts of things, right? Within the center, things that I can control. Within the outside, things that I cannot control. And the image is very, very depictive of our life. Things within our life, we can control. Things outside our control, outside of our life, we cannot necessarily control. So the next tool to build resilience that I'm going to talk about today is practicing goal setting and aggressive personal time management. So aggressive personal time management is a mouthful, but we will get there. This means maintaining a pre-planned written personal calendar or agenda that lists your goals, it lists your requirements, maybe even choices that you have in your personal life. I remember that when I was completing my master's, I was also working 2 full-time jobs or part-time jobs, maintaining relationships with friends and family, conducting research for my thesis, and also trying to be quote unquote a normal 24-year-old. It all felt really overwhelming. So the minute I chose to take control and started using that agenda to engage in aggressive personal time management, my life felt calm and I felt really organized. To this day, I continue to use an agenda for everything that I do. If you think that you're going to lose the physical agenda, we have our phones. You can use a Google Calendar or your Apple Calendar, whatever type of calendar you choose to use. Some people use a big, large calendar that they put in the kitchen or on the wall in their office. Either way. Aggressive personal time management also includes allowing for time to do what you want to do in your personal life. It's not just your tasks, it also includes scheduling and allowing for self-care. Which brings us perfectly to the next topic. So building a wellness plan is another tool to help become more resilient. In order to do this, first you have to become more self-aware. So start with something simple like daily check-ins. Ask yourself, how am I doing today? How well am I taking care of myself? What is missing or what have I let go of? And where do I go from here? Make a plan, incorporate self-care into that, and do some check-ins. My definition of self-care came from a presentation that I saw a couple of years ago, and self-care really is what I like to say, the conscious, deliberate act of engaging in an activity for yourself without feeling guilty. It helps reduce stress, it helps maintain and enhance our short and long-term health and well-being. Really, self-care is necessary for our effectiveness and success in honoring our professional and personal commitments, which as managers, I can only begin to believe is key to your role, right? Self-care is very individual. It also means something different for all of us. Right now, your self-care might look very different than 1 year ago. Chances are it probably does. I know mine does, definitely. Self-care could be a bath. It could be a run. It could be a game of golf. It could be a nice hot cup of tea with a book. Self-care doesn't just have to be things, though. It can also present as setting boundaries, saying no, staying home, or even asking for help.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. Excellent information. I'll do my best to try to summarize and reflect the great advice that you've given us. Donc ici, Amanda parle de la résilience et de la prévention de l'épuisement professionnel. La résilience, la capacité à résister à l'adversité et à rebondir après des événements difficiles de la vie. Si vous connaissez une personne résiliente, vous pouvez écrire dans le chat qu'est-ce qui, selon vous, la rend si résiliente pour partager avec les autres. Mais notez que certaines personnes ont vécu des expériences ou traumatismes significatifs et que de parler de résilience pour ces personnes n'est peut-être pas approprié. Donc, le niveau de résilience de chacun est unique et peut varier aussi dans le temps. Un des outils pour nous aider à bâtir notre résilience, c'est de comprendre qu'est-ce qui est sous notre contrôle. Donc, la première diapositive qui a été montrée. Je vous demande donc de vous demander sur quoi vous avez un contrôle en ce moment. Donc, si vous avez une préoccupation, demandez-vous si vous pouvez la contrôler directement et peut-être même la mettre sur papier pour réfléchir plus longuement. L'outil suivant qui a été présenté par Amanda est de se fixer les objectifs et de bien gérer son temps. Donc, de tenir un calendrier avec la liste de vos objectifs et vos choix personnels. On parle de l'importance de prévoir du temps pour faire ce que nous aimons et de prendre du temps pour prendre soin de nous. Ensuite, on parle d'élaborer un plan de mieux-être. Pour ce faire, vous devez devenir plus conscient de vous-même. C'est quelque chose qui n'est pas facile. Donc, commencez par quelque chose de simple, comme des vérifications ou des check-ins quotidiens. Demandez-vous comment vous allez et si vous prenez bien soin de vous-même. Le soin de soi, c'est un acte conscient de s'engager dans une activité pour soi-même sans se sentir coupable. Donc, et tout ça pour tenter de réduire notre stress. Donc, ça peut être une activité qu'on aime, mais aussi de se fixer des limites et de dire non ou de demander de l'aide. Back over to you, Marianne.
Yes, thank you, ladies. So I'm just looking at some of the comments in the chat that I wanted to talk about before we move on. So one comment that came up is somebody said, my issue is I tend to put way too many things on such agenda lists that you're talking about. Any recommendations?
Definitely. So this is common. We often say, oh, I feel disorganized, or I have so much to do, let's create a to-do list. And then in creating that to-do list, we actually cause ourselves more stress and anxiety because we see these 10 things that we have yet to complete. And so my way of battling that is kind of, what about trying a done list? Or what about creating a list that has two sides? One side is to do, and then when it's done, not only do you just check it, cross it off, but you write that it's also done. By doing that, you get a sense of accomplishment and a sense of accomplishment, really. And it reduces some of that anxiety of just having a list of things that you have to do, because now you also see things that you've already accomplished and things that you've done in a day. We do so much in our day that we don't actually realize. And so if we sit down and take a minute to write those things down, we feel better, right? We notice that we actually have the capacity to handle a lot of things. So try a done list instead.
Perfect, thank you.
My pleasure.
So how about burnout? I often hear managers saying that they are feeling burnt out. How do you know the difference if they're like really stressed and they have too much going on, or if they're actually experiencing burnout? How do the two differ?
Right. So burnout is often misunderstood. It's very misunderstood. Like you said, Marianne, people think that stress is burnout and burnout is stress, but they're not the same. It's not just being stressed or exhausted or feeling like we are forgetting things every now and then. Burnout is defined as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. So it's characterized by three different dimensions. The first dimension that we will talk about is feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. The second dimension would be increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativity or cynicism related to one's job. And the third dimension is going to be reduced professional efficacy. So you'll see on the chart on the screen that people experiencing burnout will notice changes in thoughts, behaviors, emotions, motivations, bodily sensations, right? We all have different ways of experiencing burnout because we all have different thresholds for stress. We all feel tired from time to time, but the exhaustion of burnout is very different. It actually feels overwhelming. We are tired most of the time, both physically and emotionally. And because of that, sometimes even mentally exhausted, right? You may also experience an increased mental distance or detachment from your job, like I mentioned, and you could have a lot of negative or cynical thoughts related to your job. Another aspect of burnout that many people experience is that you actually might find out or might start experiencing a dislike for a job, or even a dislike or dissatisfaction with activities that you previously enjoyed or activities that you used to be passionate about. This lower level of engagement itself starts to feel frustrating, and that's kind of where we know this isn't just stress, this is maybe burnout. It could also be or it will also make it harder for you to work, right? You might notice a lower sense of efficacy in your job or a reduced productivity, an inability to cope with the everyday demands of your job. Everything feels overwhelming. The effects ripple into our personal lives as well. And so, we get into this idea of, well, what causes burnout? There's so many different ideas. Researchers will agree that really the ultimate cause, or one of the main causes at least, is chronic stress. So let's just talk about an example for a minute. We know that burnout is more likely to occur when demands outweigh our resources. So perhaps as a manager, you just received a new mandate or a new directive, but you don't have the staff or the resources to action the new mandate or directive. Or perhaps you just hired 4 new employees and all of them need onboard training as well as job shadowing or mentoring. But you hired those 4 employees because you were already short-staffed and don't have the resources to accomplish the current work amongst your team. Now you have to manage a short-staffed team while asking them to also help with onboarding 4 new employees. Both of these examples are real-life examples where demands outweigh our resources and could cause burnout. So other things that researchers agree on in relation to burnout is that situational and individual factors may contribute or even increase the likelihood of an individual developing burnout. Let's think of this example. When a car is running out of gas, you have 2 options. We either fill it up or we stop driving the car. So when you think of burnout, we can follow the same philosophy. It means that it's absolutely necessary to restore your energy reserve if you want to avoid the breakdown of your health. And to do this, it means we take a physical or mental break. The physical mental break can be very difficult for some. We get caught up in it, or we get caught up in this idea of I should be doing more, I know I can do more, I feel I'm not doing enough, all of that. Those are those negative automatic thoughts that we have to kind of pause and take a minute. At the end of the day, we have to let go. We have to choose to pause and check in with ourselves, like I said, and check in with how we are managing. Medication or vitamins, it's not the cure for everything. If our energy expenditure does not drop drastically, then short-term fixes are only going to serve to delay the moment when we experience, quote unquote, the crash that many of us talk about. So we have to accept that we are burnt out and be okay with asking for help, because that's one of the tools that's going to help us get there.
Excellent, merci Amanda. Donc, pour faire un petit sommaire en français, Amanda parle d'épuisement professionnel, un terme qui est souvent mal compris. Souvent, on va mélanger ce concept-là avec le stress. Mais un épuisement professionnel, c'est pas seulement d'être stressé ou épuisé, oublier des choses de temps en temps. L'épuisement professionnel est défini comme un syndrome qui résulte d'un stress professionnel chronique qui n'a pas été géré avec succès. Il se caractérise par 3 dimensions. La première dimension contient des sentiments d'épuisement ou d'épuisement énergique. Une distance, comme deuxième facteur, une distance mentale accrue par rapport à son travail ou des sentiments de négativité ou de cynisme liés à son travail. Et la troisième dimension, une efficacité professionnelle réduite. Donc, ça peut inclure des changements dans nos pensées, dans nos comportements, dans nos motivations, sensations corporelles. Mais nous vivons tous le burn-out de façon différente, car on a tous des seuils de stress qui vont varier. Donc, c'est pas juste de la fatigue, mais une fatigue constante et écrasante. Ça peut impliquer une distance mentale perçue accrue ou un détachement par rapport à notre travail avec des pensées négatives. Donc, vous pouvez avoir l'impression de ne pas aimer un travail ou une activité qui vous passionnait auparavant. Donc, il y a cet élément-là il y a un changement qui a été produit. Il sera peut-être difficile de travailler. Il y aura peut-être une baisse du sentiment d'efficacité, de la productivité ou une incapacité à faire face aux exigences quotidiennes de notre travail. Il peut y avoir un impact sur notre vie personnelle. Puis en ce qui concerne les causes, les chercheurs croient que le stress chronique est un des importants facteurs de l'épuisement professionnel. Donc, il y a aussi des facteurs situationnels et individuels qui peuvent contribuer ou augmenter les probabilités de vivre un épuisement professionnel. Il est souvent nécessaire de faire une pause physique et mentale, ce qui n'est peut-être pas facile pour tout le monde. Donc, d'où l'importance du lâcher-prise, l'importance d'accepter que nous sommes épuisés et accepter de demander de l'aide. Encore quelque chose qui n'est pas nécessairement facile. Back over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Hélène. Thank you for the wonderful translation. So we'll jump into another strategy or another tool that I like to use, and this is called the Eisenhower Priority Matrix. Some of you may have seen this before, or some of you may have heard of it in a different context, but what this matrix really does is it consists of 4 quadrants that help with time management. And in a nutshell, that can kind of help with our burnout. So along the horizontal axis is our level of urgency. And then along the vertical axis is our level of importance. The premise here is to help you categorize and organize your competing priorities under different areas of importance and urgency, and really to help you plan your time better and to reduce stress. So as managers, not only is this tool useful for you, but this can be useful for anyone on your team who may come to you saying they feel overwhelmed. Let's talk about each quadrant for a minute. Quadrant 1 is do first. So these are your tasks that are important to your personal or work life. They have to be completed today or at the latest tomorrow. Quadrant 2 is do later. These are the tasks that are also important, but they don't need to be finished immediately, so you can schedule a dedicated time to complete these things. Far too often, like we were just talking about, we create these to-do lists without giving thought to what needs to be done for each task, the time sensitivity or the demand, or even the importance of the task. Sometimes I know that I use my Outlook calendar, or some of us might use the task feature in Outlook or the reminder feature. But when we're burnt out, when we're overwhelmed, it is very easy to just ignore those reminders and press dismiss. Quadrant 3 is delegate. So these tasks are not necessarily important, but they fall into your hands. This is where assertiveness and boundary setting comes in. So if the task can be accomplished by the requester, or if it can be delegated to somebody else amongst your team, then it fits into quadrant 3. And quadrant number 4, eliminate. These are things that you shouldn't be doing, maybe because they're not in your scope of practice, or because they're time-wasting activity. So, as the quadrant says, we eliminate them.
Très intéressant, Amanda. Donc, on parle de la matrice des priorités Eisenhower. Donc, comme vous voyez à l'écran, il y a 4 cadrans. L'axe horizontal représente le niveau d'urgence et sur l'axe vertical, on voit le niveau d'importance. Donc, l'objectif est de vous aider à catégoriser et à organiser vos priorités concurrentes selon les différents niveaux d'importance et d'urgence afin de mieux planifier votre temps et de réduire votre stress. Donc, en tant que gestionnaire, cette méthode peut aussi être utile, pas juste pour vous, mais aussi pour vos employés, pour les aider à prioriser leurs propres tâches. Donc, si on regarde les 4 différents cadrans, donc dans le cadran 1, on voit les tâches qui sont à faire en premier, idéalement aujourd'hui ou demain, parce que ce sont des choses qui sont importantes et urgentes. Pour le deuxième cadran, c'est des choses qu'on peut faire un peu plus tard. Le troisième cadran, si on est capable de les déléguer, parce que ce sont des tâches qui ne sont pas nécessairement importantes pour vous, mais qui vous incombent et qui doivent être faites. C'est là aussi que l'affirmation de soi et l'établissement de limites peut entrer en jeu. Et dans le quatrième cadran, on a les tâches qu'on peut éliminer. Donc, des choses qui sont pas importantes et pas urgentes. Amanda, I'll give it back to you for more strategies.
Thank you. Yes, so I think this might be the last strategy or second last strategy that we're going to talk about today. It is called the Pomodoro Technique. And so we have added the link to the chat, I believe, for all of you to look after or to look at it after, but I'm going to quickly summarize it for you guys. So the technique can help you power through distractions and get things done while taking frequent breaks. It's also probably one of the simplest productivity methods to implement since all you need is a timer. Let's talk about how it works. So step number 1, we choose a task that we want to accomplish. In doing so, we have to make sure that we have everything we need to accomplish this task. Often we start a task and get distracted because we weren't fully prepared to focus on that thing. As an example, there have been many times in my life where I think, hey, let's bake muffins, and then I forget, oh, I don't have any chocolate chips. So choose a task to be accomplished. Make sure you have everything you need to accomplish the task. Step number 2, you're going to want to set your timer to 25 minutes, and then you work until the timer rings. This is 1 Pomodoro session. Step 3, after your first session, you take a 5-minute break and you restart the timer and restart the task. And step 4 is you take a longer break after every 4 Pomodoro sessions. So 25, 5, 25, 5, 25, 5, etc., etc. 25 minutes might not work for everybody. Maybe your maximum focus time is 15 minutes, so you do 15 minutes. But maybe you set 25 with the intention of completing 25, and then you get really into your task, and next thing you know, the timer goes off and you want to extend another 5 minutes, or maybe you extend another 40 to 45 minutes. As long as you maintain the pattern of task, break, you will balance out the burnout and you'll feel more sense of control and less stress. And as I mentioned, the video link is in the chat, so I encourage each of you to take 5 minutes of your time after this or this evening to watch the video. So before we get too close to the end of our time together, I really want to cover the topic of emotional intelligence, specifically because increasing our emotional intelligence can also prevent burnout. So emotional intelligence involves the ability to manage emotions. It's our ability to understand, use, and manage our own emotions in positive ways to actually relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and to diffuse conflict in our life. There are 4 categories to emotional intelligence. So first category is self-awareness. And then we have self-management. And then we have social awareness. And last, we have relationship management. So you guys will notice that awareness and management are the key words in emotional intelligence. Emotional self-awareness, for example, allows us to understand the sources of our frustration or anxiety, and it improves our ability to consider different responses. Self-management allows us to stay calm, control our impulses, and act appropriately when we're faced with stress. Conflict management skills allow us to channel our anxiety and emotions into problem-solving mode rather than allowing the situation to bother us or to keep us up all night. And empathy also helps to fight this stress. When we actively try to understand others, we often begin to care about them. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of compassion. So, as with other positive emotions, compassion can counter the psychological effects of stress. And attuning to other people's perspectives, attitudes, and beliefs contributes really to our ability to gain trust and to influence others in a positive way. This, on a very practical level, often means that we get the help we need before the stress spirals into burnout.
Merci Amanda. Donc, en français, une autre stratégie que Amanda a décrite pour prévenir l'épuisement professionnel est la technique Pomodoro. Donc, une technique qui peut nous aider à surmonter les distractions et accomplir nos tâches tout en faisant des pauses fréquentes. C'est probablement une des méthodes de productivité les plus simples à mettre en œuvre, puisqu'il suffit seulement d'un minuteur. Donc, la façon dont ça fonctionne, vous choisissez une tâche à accomplir en vous assurant que vous avez tout ce que vous avez besoin pour accomplir la tâche. Ensuite, vous réglez le minuteur à 25 minutes et travaillez jusqu'à ce que le minuteur sonne. Il s'agit à ce moment-là d'une session Pomodoro. Une fois que la session est terminée, faire une pause de 5 minutes et ensuite recommencer la tâche. Donc, faites une pause plus longue après 4 sessions Pomodoro. Et comme Amanda l'a indiqué, pour certaines personnes, ça va peut-être être 15 minutes, puis il y en a peut-être qu'après 25 minutes, ils vont arrêter le minuteur, puis ils vont continuer un autre 5 minutes. Donc, c'est de trouver votre rythme et de l'appliquer à plusieurs reprises. Le lien vers la vidéo se trouve dans le chat si vous voulez plus d'informations. Maintenant, un petit mot sur l'intelligence émotionnelle. Donc, travailler sur notre intelligence émotionnelle peut également aider à prévenir l'épuisement professionnel. C'est la capacité de comprendre, d'utiliser, de gérer ses propres émotions de manière positive pour soulager le stress. Aussi pour communiquer efficacement et faire preuve d'empathie envers les autres, surmonter les difficultés et désamorcer les conflits. Donc, les 4 catégories de l'intelligence émotionnelle sont la conscience de soi, la gestion de soi, la conscience sociale et la gestion des relations. Par exemple, avoir des compétences en matière de gestion des conflits peut nous permettre de canaliser notre énergie et nos émotions vers la résolution de problèmes plutôt que de laisser la situation nous déranger. Amanda a aussi parlé de l'empathie qui peut nous aider car quand on essaie activement de comprendre les autres, ça peut nous permettre de nous intéresser plus à eux, de voir leur point de vue. Donc, le fait d'être à l'écoute de ces points de vue, des attitudes et des croyances des autres peut contribuer à notre capacité à gagner la confiance des autres et à les influencer. Marianne, over to you.
Merci, Hélène and Amanda. We'll now open the floor for questions. Feel free to raise your hand or type the question in the chat section in the language of your choice. Some things I just wanted to comment on. I see a lot of people asking if the presentation will be made available after. Yes, we can send the presentation to everyone. And some of the resources you'll also find on the GC Ontario NMC page, and I'll share the link with you afterwards as well. And a lot of the comments that I'm seeing, I like about the self-care, where people are talking about different methods or things that they can do. You know, I always think about too, like, you know, when you're in the plane, you always hear that story about you put the mask on yourself before you put on your child, right? You can't take care of anybody else if you're not taking care of you first, you know? So really important to do the self-care. I find that often we feel like we don't have that time or we feel guilty doing it, you know, but what's the cost of that, right? So think about, you know, end goal, what's going to happen? Like, do you want to become, you know, ill because it could affect your physical and your mental health, or, you know, like make sure that we're taking care of ourselves.
Definitely. I agree, Marianne.
So any questions? Anybody, if you want to raise your hand or type your questions in the chat. So I see there's a hand there. Just have to figure out where it's coming from. Sorry. Oh, we have a few hands. Okay. If I can allow for the mic. So Stacy, if you have a question, if you'd like to go ahead.
There you go. Am I unmuted now? I think so.
Yes, yes, you are.
Thank you very much for presenting this session. It's extremely helpful and important. One question I have, though, is related to the self-check-in. I went through a depression about 20 odd years ago. I got counseling and got tips and tricks on how to monitor myself going forward in the future. Yet a couple of years ago, I found myself caught off guard because I was in worse shape than I had realized. Think of the frog in the pot of water that's gradually put up to boil. He doesn't realize he's boiling until it's too late. So what kind of tips are there that when you're doing the daily check-in that you can realize the slow and gradual deterioration that you wouldn't otherwise notice that you'd miss?
Wonderful questions. Wonderful question, Stacey. And you're bang on when you say oftentimes we don't notice the gradual changes that happen. And so that check-in piece is key. Nonetheless, it can still happen. So for me, I really like looking at what is my telltale sign? What is that one, or what are those two things that if I notice that's missing, if I notice that has changed, that's my big indicator that I really need to take a step back and reevaluate, right? So for some people, it is that their meal prep for their lunches is stopped. Or for others, maybe they're not communicating with their friends as often as they used to. Maybe they don't care about that show that they used to love, right? That part of that check-in is what have I let go of, or what isn't working anymore.
I really like the mental health continuum as well, so if we'll share that with you all afterwards. But you can see as well the shift when you're in the green, which they consider the healthy, the yellow is the reacting, the orange is the injured, the red is the ill. So you can look at all the signs and symptoms on that as well. And Amanda also shared that great slide with you about all the different signs and symptoms. And you can see where you should be. And if you start moving closer to the red, that might be a sign, oh no, I better get that checked out and talk to somebody.
Definitely another great resource, Marianne.
Yes.
So we have somebody. Sorry, yes.
Quick summary in French. So it was a great
Yes.
question. Merci pour la question. Donc, la question était comment qu'on peut savoir, parfois on ne réalise pas quand on fait nos check-in qu'il y a quelque chose qui ne va pas bien et qu'on s'enligne peut-être vers un épuisement professionnel. Donc, comment qu'on fait dans nos check-in? Et Amanda parlait de essayer d'identifier peut-être une ou deux choses qu'on sait que quand ça ne va pas bien, c'est des choses qui changent. Par exemple, si on sait qu'on adore faire la préparation des repas et là, tout d'un coup, plusieurs jours d'affilée, on passe moins de temps dans la cuisine ou on commence à perdre contact avec nos amis, puis d'habitude, c'est quelque chose qui est vraiment important. Donc, d'essayer d'identifier des choses qu'on garde en tête et qu'on essaie de voir s'il n'y a pas des changements à ces niveaux-là. Et Marianne a parlé aussi du continuum de la santé mentale. Donc, on voit une liste de signes et symptômes qui peuvent graduellement détériorer quand on passe, par exemple, de la zone verte et qu'on s'en va vers le rouge. Donc, de garder un œil sur le continuum pour pouvoir voir s'il n'y a pas des signes et symptômes qui nous donnent des petits signaux comme quoi que les choses vont moins bien.
Thank you, Alan. So we have another question here from Isabel. If you'd like to go ahead, I think I disabled or I let your mic on there.
Hi, it's a simple question because I've actually suffered, I wouldn't say full burnouts myself, but a couple of episodes. And I was wondering, does having suffered one episode make one more susceptible to another one?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know if it would make you more susceptible, but perhaps just having experienced the previous level of burnout maybe has lowered that tolerance a bit. I don't know if susceptible is the word that I would use, though. Yeah.
And wondering too, like if you fully got back over to the green, so if
Right.
you're more so in the yellow or the orange, it may be easier to fall back into that. So building up those resources and the resiliency too.
Definitely. So if we really did have a full burnout episode, if we want to call it an episode, did we get back to our pre-burnout place? Or were there some effects that lasted, right? Maybe that could have an impact.
And if I'm allowed, then a follow-up question, because of
course.
your answer made me think, is there possibly then a personality that's more likely to experience burnout than other, if it's, I don't know, type?
Yes, type
we
A
talk about type A.
personalities.
Yeah,
So managers, who tend
Sometimes I'll
to
see
be
women
type
because
A personalities, right? Because you're that go-getter, you got to do everything, right? So
yeah, sometimes when you were saying, one of the first thing you said was, without guilt. And for some women, and I would, speaking for myself, Roman Catholic women, but I know it's probably all religions, and it's just a culture. I'm not a religious person. We tend to really hang on to that guilt.
we do. Yeah. Yeah. So type A personalities, or people who expect perfection or have perfectionistic ideas, right? That piece, the idea of letting go, the idea of not feeling guilty feels next to impossible. So, yeah, I would say that would be like Marianne said, that would be the personality type if we're going to type it.
Donc, pour faire un sommaire brièvement en français, donc très bonne question et merci aux gens aussi de partager vos expériences personnelles. Est-ce qu'on est plus susceptible de faire un deuxième burn-out lorsqu'on en a fait un premier? Je pense que Amanda disait que ça dépendait. Si on pense au continuum, si on n'est pas nécessairement revenu dans le vert au côté santé, ça peut être, on peut avoir peut-être des petits résidus qui font qu'on est un petit peu plus, peut-être susceptible, c'est peut-être pas le meilleur mot, mais qu'il y a peut-être plus de risques qu'on retourne au burn-out. Je crois aussi que parfois, quand on vit un épisode d'épuisement professionnel, on est peut-être plus alerte aux signes et symptômes, donc peut-être que ça peut nous protéger aussi d'une façon. Fait que je vais juste rajouter mon grain de sel là-dedans. Ensuite, on a demandé est-ce qu'il y a des types de personnalités qui sont peut-être plus susceptibles de vivre un épisode d'épuisement professionnel. Et je pense que, comme Amanda disait et Marianne, il y a certaines personnalités qui sont plus perfectionnistes, ou les types de personnalités de type A qui veulent vraiment tout réussir. Il y a beaucoup de gestionnaires aussi qui sont dans cette situation-là où est-ce qu'ils sont très, très motivés, qui sont perfectionnistes, sont peut-être un petit peu plus susceptibles de vivre des épisodes difficiles.
thank you. So I know our time is almost done here, but if you can just hang on a little bit longer. If you have to go, I understand. But there's just really one question that I really want to get to, I think is important here. So as managers, we're expected to monitor the mental health of our team members and provide support and assistance as required. Are there any tips you can share on how managers can provide the support without burning out themselves?
Yeah, definitely. So be curious, be compassionate, be non-judgmental, right? If you don't already have regular meetings with your team members, check in with them. Offer your observations. Maybe you've noticed that they have stopped saying hi every morning and walk directly to their desk. Of course, this is when we're in the office. These are small little things that we can become attuned with as managers, and it'll help us recognize when some employees may be on the verge of, or close to, or even already burnt out. So you want to be curious, you want to be compassionate, ask how they're managing their projects, ask if there's anything that keeps falling to the wayside. If possible, offer to delegate a task to someone else or extend the deadlines, right? You can also sit down with them and teach them the Pomodoro Technique, provide examples of maybe how it has helped you. Ultimately, the key thing here is be compassionate and non-judgmental, right? Not only towards that individual, but towards yourself. Because if you're on the verge of burnout, then your energy reserve, your resiliency reserve is already depleted. And I don't know how much you can give to another to try and help them.
Merci. Merci, Amanda. Donc, la question, très bonne question. Donc, comment qu'on peut soutenir la santé mentale de nos employés, surtout quand on doit s'occuper de notre propre santé mentale aussi en tant que gestionnaire? Il y a différentes choses, donc d'être curieux, de ne pas juger ce que nos employés vivent, avoir des rencontres régulières avec eux pour être capable de voir les changements qu'ils peuvent vivre et de leur en parler, de démontrer de la compassion le plus possible. Si possible aussi de changer des délais de certaines tâches qui doivent être accomplies ou de déléguer à d'autres employés, et aussi de démontrer de la compassion envers soi-même aussi, car je pense que c'est important de s'occuper de soi aussi pour être capable de soutenir les autres autour de nous.
Thank you. So that's all the time we have for today. The NMC will be posting the video on YouTube and we'll be distributing that link. Please watch for the feedback form from the NMC. We'd appreciate if you could fill that out. If there is any questions that we were not able to get to, or if you have any other outstanding questions, feel free to forward them to the NMC mailbox, which I posted there in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. You can also join the NMC Ontario GC Connects page, which is also posted there. I have a lot of resources there available on burnout under the mental health folder. So right now I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Amanda for providing the concrete tools on how to prevent burnout and build resilience. I also want to thank my colleague Ellen for helping with the translation, the NMC team, Natalie and Hamish for all their support behind the scenes. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found this virtual talk informative. Merci tout le monde pour votre participation. Until next time, best wishes et bonne fin de journée. À la prochaine.